welcome back to All About the Disney Life. I am Danny B, the girl who is all about the Disney life. We talked about the scary stuff that have happened at Disney parks, but why don't we talk about the 10 Disney myths, the urban legends that have been around for years, and let's see if they're actually true or not. And let's see if true Disney fans, if you know these urban legends, you can put in your word as to whether you think it's true or if it's not true. So here we go. I found an article. It is basically 10 Disney myths you believed for too long. So here we go. Number 1, Walt Disney is cryogenically frozen. I've heard about this one. Everybody has heard about this one. Everyone believes that Walt Disney froze his body and his body is beneath Disneyland Castle. Under Sleeping Beauty's castle at Disneyland, Walt Disney's body is there cryogenically frozen to be unfrozen so that he can continue his life's work. Everybody has heard of that rumor. Everybody believes that that is what happened. So let's see what the facts say. This is perhaps the weirdest Disney myth of all time. No kidding. It's frequently said that Walt Disney, who died at the age of 65 on December 15th, 1966, wanted to ensure his remains would be frozen, and that one day when the technology was available, be unfrozen and reanimated. But contrary to this wild and wildly popular belief, Walt Disney never had his remains frozen. In fact, his family had him cremated just 2 days after he passed away and buried him at Forest Lawn Cemetery in Glendale, California. That is where Walt Disney and his wonderful wife Lillian are resting at that cemetery. Walt Disney is not frozen. Come on. That's very far-fetched. I wonder who started that one. Now this answers my question. How did this myth get started? So according to Mental Floss, it's likely originated from Bob Nelson back in 1972. Nelson, who was the president of the Cryonics Society of California at the time, spoke with the Los Angeles Times and happened to mention Walt Disney. To Nelson's credit, he did say that Walt Disney wasn't cryogenically frozen and remarked, "I personally have seen his ashes." However, Nelson also said that Walt Disney wanted to be frozen. This was nothing more than speculation, but Nelson noted that Walt Disney Studios had called him before Walt's death and asked questions about cryogenics, from the process to the staff to the history of the process. So although Nelson gave the world correct information, the sensational nature of his other remarks accidentally spun up one icy cool myth that's persisted for decades. So even though the facts have said, and I have seen YouTube video where people have gone to cemeteries of famous celebrities, there was one that says that they went to the cemetery where Walt Disney is buried, where his ashes are buried. So Walt Disney is not cryogenically frozen beneath Disneyland Castle. He will not be coming back. As much as we would love for him to come back to continue his life's work, the man is gone. He died in 65. Hold on, quick math. The man's been dead for 60 years. It's coming up to 60 years since Walt Disney passed away. Let's let the man rest in peace. Number 2, Disneyland's Sleeping Beauty Castle clock is set to the time Walt died. Okay. If you ever walked through Sleeping Beauty Castle at Disneyland Park, you may have noticed an incredible and interesting designed chandelier clock hanging overhead. This clock, which sits right in the corner of the 2 arches framing the entrance and exit of the castle's walkway, is gorgeous, but it's also long been the source of a Disney myth. If you take a closer look at the chandelier clock, you will notice the time is wrong. In fact, the clock is actually stopped. Many people assume that it stopped at the time Walt Disney died back in 1966. According to Disney Parks blog, however, there's no significance behind the time you see on the Sleeping Beauty Castle chandelier clock. The clock, which was added to the castle in 1966, doesn't work simply because it never worked. There's no significance to the numbers, the time you see on the clock, or any other details you might notice. It's nothing but a beautiful ancient piece. All right, number 3. No one has ever died at Disneyland or Disney World. Well, if you just watched my video about the scary stuff that happened at Disneyland and at Disney World, apparently there have been some things that have happened at those 2 parks. So here we go. Nothing bad ever happens at Disney theme parks, right? Wrong. Well, the happiest and most magical places on earth might be incredible, but sometimes emergencies and deaths do happen. However, for some reason, it's become a popular fact that no one has ever died at Disneyland or Disney World. The exact wording of this myth varies. Some will say no one has ever died on Disney property at these resorts, while others claim Disney won't allow anyone to be pronounced dead on property. No matter how it's presented, though, one detail is certain. It's not true. Deaths have happened at both U.S. resorts, though they are quite rare, and people have been declared dead on site, both at Disneyland and Disney World. For example, a plane crash in the Epcot parking lot in 1984 resulted in 2 individuals being declared dead on site. Similarly, in 1985, someone was pronounced dead after being run over by a tour bus in the Disneyland parking lot. So while it's not a common occurrence, and it's always a tragedy when it happens, death takes place on Disney property on both coasts. Number 4, Toy Story characters drop to the ground if guests yell, "Andy's coming." I've heard of this one. I've read this one. I think it's a ridiculous myth, but here we go. Here's a Disney myth that's more recent. Well, probably recent back in the day. Many people believe that if you shout, "Andy's coming," when you see any of the characters from the Toy Story franchise at any of the parks, they'll immediately drop to the ground. The idea is the real-life toys don't want Andy to spot them wandering around, so they freeze and drop just like in the Toy Story films themselves. This myth went viral back in the early 2010s thanks to a meme that explained it and showed an image of Woody, Jessie, and a guest laying on the ground. It's actually because it went viral that it's now a myth. Before the Andy's coming trick went viral, characters did occasionally drop to the ground and pretended they were toys when guests yelled this. However, because of this popular thing that happened, it had to be stopped. It was becoming too frequent and ultimately too unsafe for cast members to continue. So the Andy's calling fun is now nothing but a myth. The reason that they stopped doing the Andy's coming call and the Toy Story characters are instructed not to drop to the ground, it's because of the costumes. They keep dropping to the ground, they'll get ruined. So if you see any of the Toy Story characters, stop yelling, "Andy's coming." I don't think it's a meme anymore. They do it for just regular people as like a TikTok trend. If you walk into a room and say, "Andy's coming," those kids who grew up with Toy Story movies know what they have to do. They drop to the ground like a toy. But don't say it in front of the cast members who are dressed up as the Toy Story characters because the costumes will get ruined and the cast members could get hurt. All right, next myth. Winnie the Pooh is a male character. I already assumed that. If you've long thought Winnie the Pooh, tubby little cubby all stuffed with fluff, was male, we've got some surprising news for you. Winnie may have a masculine voice, but Disney's beloved yellow bear is actually a girl. Okay, so the wonderful Pooh Bear, who has been voiced by Sterling Holloway and Jim Cummings, is a girl. I think I know where this is going at, so I think I know this myth. According to Bustle, Pooh's real-life backstory reveals the character's gender. The story of Winnie the Pooh came from a black bear at the London Zoo named Winnie. The real Winnie, who was originally from Winnipeg, Canada, and lived at the zoo, was a girl. Winnie's story gets even more interesting, though. A soldier named Harry Colburn actually gave Winnie to the London Zoo when he had to travel to France and with his unit in the British Army. Once at the zoo, Winnie made a new best friend, a little boy named Christopher Robin, who visited often and named his toy bear after her. Christopher's father, A.A. Mill, noticed their special relationship, and the rest is literally Disney history. Thank you, Harry Colburn, for introducing Winnie the Pooh. Oh, number 6. I have heard of this one. Depending if you really look closely at this scene, you know what I'm talking about. The word, I don't know if I should say this word on the internet. There's a certain word that appears in The Lion King, and if you know this word, you know what I'm talking about. If you have heard of this myth, and I have heard of this one, there's a dirty little secret hiding in the animated scenes of The Lion King. You aren't alone if you see this. This myth has been around for decades, but there are plenty of screenshots of proof floating around online. But here's the deal. This myth is totally made up. According to a HuffPost interview with Danny Sito, former Disney animator who worked on movies throughout the 1990s, there is no truth to the rumor that this certain word can be spotted on screen during The Lion King. The scene in question, when Simba kicks up dust and it floats into the night sky overhead, does have a hidden message. The dust spells out SFX, making a subtle nod to the special effects team who worked on the movie. All right, so the next one. Snow White was the first animated Disney movie. I thought it was. I guess not. If you heard that Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs from 1937 was the first ever animated film created by Disney, it is a myth. It's not only the first animated movie, but it's also not the first feature-length animated movie from Disney. Interesting. This myth is likely nothing more than a pop culture mix-up. Many people think that Snow White was the very first animated release ever, but Walt Disney himself acknowledged that it wasn't even the first feature-length cartoon by 20 years. And when it comes to Disney history, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs was actually the second animated film created. The first ever animated feature-length film from Disney was actually the Academy Award review of Walt Disney cartoons. That project was a collection of several previously released animated shorts, all linked together with new narration. Ironically, this movie was released solely to build excitement for the upcoming Snow White, and that's what made it Walt Disney's Animation's very first animated feature. Okay. Number 8, Disney didn't create the word Imagineer. All right. The word Imagineer is a special word with Disney, and plenty of us assume that Disney created it solely for its own use. After all, what other industry or company relies on Imagineers to dream up projects and possibilities, then bring them to life with that special Disney magic? Well, the idea that Disney was the first to use the title of Imagineer is a myth. The word was actually coined back in the 1940s by Alcoa, a company that manufactured aluminum. Ironically, it was created to mean the exact same thing it does for Disney today, a blend of imagination and Imagineering. Disney didn't even lay claim to the word Imagineering until 1989, when the company finally filed for a trademark. In that filing, Disney claimed that it first used the word in 1962, almost 20 years after Alcoa first used it. Number 9, Disney World sits under a dome to prevent bad weather. No, it doesn't. Because I've... on my honeymoon, I experienced like a tsunami of rainstorm if I ever did experience that much rain in my life. The myth sounds pretty unbelievable, and that's because it is. However, there are many people who genuinely believe that Walt Disney World Resort sits underneath a huge dome. That dome supposedly keeps the parks, hotels, and even Disney Springs indoors to prevent inclement weather from affecting guests. Baloney. However, if you have ever visited Walt Disney World on a rainy day, you know there's no dome protecting the park and larger resorts. When weather strikes, it absolutely impacts Disney World, especially during hurricane season. And number 10, the last Disney myth. Disney's turkey legs are actually made out of emu. If you love the turkey legs at Walt Disney World or Disneyland, well, according to some people, those aren't actually turkey legs. They're actually emu legs. That's right, according to the internet. You supposedly munching on emu meat when you grab a turkey leg. You're eating emu instead of turkey. Okay. According to Snoops, however, this myth is absolutely false. Disney has addressed this oddball myth reportedly over the years, telling the press that they are 100% turkey legs. But the myth persists, in part because so many people find it hard to believe that such gigantic turkey legs exist. Part of the reason this myth is so widespread, in an interview Zachary Levi, the voice of Flynn Rider in Tangled, gave to Conan O'Brien on Conan back in 2017. Levi told O'Brien and viewers around the world that his friends that have worked at Disneyland confirmed the turkey legs were really emu legs. Though this was totally untrue, it helped spread the emu rumor much, much further. So there you have it. Those are the top 10 weirdest Disney myths out there. If you like this video, please hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe. And I hope you have a zippity-doo-dah day. Goodbye.